It's pretty surreal to me sometimes to think back to childhood, and I think that's a true statement for all of us. All of us had very interesting experiences as children and throughout our childhood and upbringing, but it's interesting that I find myself so many times weighing in on, or I should say pondering, on what it is that would truthfully send me back to that childhood and childlike just happiness. And it's more than just saying happiness, because I can experience some sort of happiness in today's world, in my life now, but saying it was happiness as a child, that's putting it lightly. Like, it was such a freedom, it was such a soul level freedom that it's hard to mimic. It's genuinely hard to mimic. And when you feel it, you know it. Like, you know what it feels like. And that's why it's so interesting to think about the whole topic of nostalgia. Because obviously most people would be like, oh, that's so nostalgic. And they would describe it as a happiness, as a good reminiscing. And a lot of times it is. But nostalgia can very easily turn into sort of a depression. And I know that's wild to frame it like that. And I'm pretty sure I've heard other people talk about that too. But I can agree with that. Not entirely to where it's always depression. But when you're just consistently reminiscing on when things were better, it can get to a point to where you long for that. And I can understand that. There's nothing wrong with that. There is something, again, surreal about thinking back to a time where you had freedom in your soul that, again, only your soul could recognize. Only you could feel it. You can't even name it when you see it. You just feel it. That type of freedom you had when you were a child, and how much you just did not care about anything. You weren't ashamed of yourself to a point, depending on what you experienced, throughout your childhood. But we all can at least remember some sort of good memories, no matter if it involved family or just experiences. And sometimes it's the most simple things, because you can even bring those things back up. And here's where, like, it can hit kind of hard. Let's just say it's like a movie. Just for example, there's a lot of things, but say it's a movie that you used to watch all the time, or a show you used to watch when you were a kid. And, like, you'll remember it. You'll be like, oh my God, I forgot this existed. I haven't seen this in years. And, like, you might watch it or put it back on or anything, and it doesn't hit you the same. And you still have appreciation for it. Like, man, I used to love this, and you're watching it. But then you can ask yourself, why doesn't it feel the same? Why doesn't it feel the same? I think it's a very valid question to ask, just to think about. Just to, just to ponder. How come this thing that right when I remembered it in this present moment, I remembered it for the first time in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, however old you are, 10 years even. You're like, I forgot this existed. And you remember it now, and it's such a wild, beautiful thing. Like, oh, that was the best. And you put it on now, and it's like, it doesn't hit the same. And sometimes it doesn't even hit close to the same, not even in the same ballpark. And that's where I think nostalgia is just a very interesting concept. Because it's cool to reminisce sometimes, but again, it can turn into a longing. It can turn into a, man, things used to be so good, and that is immediately framing your reality now as something that isn't good. Something that couldn't match the vibes that you had back then, to put it the least. To match that type of freedom you felt. Not had necessarily, but felt. Because when you were a kid, you weren't thinking about the freedom you had. You weren't thinking about the fact that you didn't work a job. You didn't have any responsibilities besides maybe elementary school at some point. But even then, you didn't care. But you weren't thinking about it. Like, when I was 7, I wasn't like, man, I gotta worry about school. I gotta get good grades and all this stuff. Like, of course, my parents pushed me to do that, and I was raised that type of way, but it wasn't even a pressure. Could it have turned into one? Of course, as you get in your older teenage years and whatnot. But, like, I don't remember caring. Even the fact that I was going to school 5 days a week as a kid, I didn't care. I had no pressure to do anything. And I think that's something very interesting to think about. Because oftentimes, like I just said, we can frame our childhood as, oh, I was so free because I had nothing to worry about. But even further, I wasn't doing anything. Like, I had no responsibilities, but you did. If you went to school, public school, assumptively, you were at school 5 days a week. And, out of kindergarten, I think you might go half days in some places. But, like, let's just say once you were actually in school, normally, that was what? 7 a.m., 8 a.m. till, I was 8 a.m. till about 2. And then middle school got later. And then high school was literally, I think, I was there at 7:50 is when my advisory started, my homeroom. And I wasn't done till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That was 5 days a week. And so I think it brings up something very interesting. It's like, why then? I mean, sure, it's elementary school, but you were still there 5 days a week. You still had work you were doing. You still had to learn. You still had different things you were doing. Had to be up in the morning on time. If you walked, if, you were on the bus, you had to make your bus stop. You had to make sure you got on the bus after school. There's just all these things that you still had a responsibility of, even if they didn't seem that much, and you still felt free. You still had that childlike feeling for a while. And so I think it's interesting to think about, you have responsibilities now. You still have, obviously, you probably have a lot more and more pressure on yourself, but like, where is that coming from? You may say society is putting a lot of pressure on you, but society just exists. And believe me, I know what it's like to want to live up to the expectations that society has placed on us. But what does it mean that they've placed on us? Is it certain people? Has anyone ever said to you, oh, you need to be doing this. Oh, you're not performing the best. Yeah, you have a good job, but you probably should be doing more. I mean, has anyone actually ever said that? And if they have, is that just one person, two people? When has society ever been the determiner of, oh, you need to be doing this, and the reason you put so much pressure on yourself? And again, it's just a question. It's just a question, and I ask it because I'm thinking to myself, I talk about society a lot. Throughout my videos and just in general, I think about it. I label it as just like, oh, society. And I really have to ask myself, what am I referring to? The system set up, the mentality, the mode of existence, the way we live, the way we make our decisions. It's a very complex topic. But I don't want to stray too far, but it's important to dissect where this pressure comes from. Because clearly we didn't have it when we were a kid. Clearly we did not. It was learned, and I think that can be agreed upon. But then you just have to ask yourself, how can I get back to that childhood freedom? How can I get back to, not necessarily the fact that I didn't have responsibilities. No. The feeling. Because, again, we haven't necessarily exposed something huge, but we've exposed a little bit of it. That when you were young, you still did have responsibilities when you were in school. You still probably had chores and all this stuff. And even though it might not equate with the level of responsibility you have now, you still did, and you still had that feeling of freedom. You still viewed that time as super nostalgic. And on top of that, it's talked about a lot in social media and just like pop culture about 2016 being like this heavenly year where everything was good and, like whatever it was, the music, the culture, sports, like whatever it was, 2016 was just a super joyous year, and I don't disagree. But it's just interesting to think about, because if we fast forward to now, and we're thinking about how things are now, all the responsibilities that I had, all the responsibilities that I wake up with, and the pressures I put on myself to be great and do all these things, did that not exist when you were in 2016? And for me, I can answer that question. I could say, yeah, it really wasn't there. I was 16 years old. That was 10 years ago. I was a 16-year-old high school student. And I remember during 2016, I didn't feel how great it was. I feel less pressure then, obviously, than I do now. Like, I had no pressure on me back then. I still had some, and I still had responsibilities, and I still experienced, something out of that childhood happiness as a 16-year-old. But again, it just boils down to where can we pinpoint that? Where can we pinpoint what actually makes life joyous and free and ecstatic? In contrast to thinking back to certain time periods as being beautiful. Basically what I'm trying to say is, like, we view 2016 as just this unbelievable year, but how did we feel when we were in it? How did we feel when we were actually in 2016? And I know a lot of people can speak for themselves, but I can speak for myself. I didn't feel like it was this super heavenly year. It was great. There were a lot of great things. I'm a sports fan. There were a lot of great sports stuff. My team won the championship that year. And there was a lot of great music, a lot of good hip-hop music, I can go on and on and on. But at that time, I can admit that maybe I was lulled to it. Maybe it was just going on in the background. So what I think this really points to, and it's not that big of a discovery, is that we are what makes things happy. We are what makes things joyous. And this isn't a crazy, discovery. This isn't a crazy epiphany, but, you can take your experience, and if you've ever asked yourself, why was childhood so free? It wasn't even because you didn't have responsibility. It's because you actually knew that you were the source. And the thing is, you might not want to give yourself that credit, but this is why we say that kids are so smart. Kids aren't necessarily like this super book smart and whatnot when we say that term. No, they're just tapped in to who they truthfully are. And the thing is, they do it almost unknowingly. They do it unknowingly. Because if you ask them these concepts and all that, sure, they don't know these big words and all this stuff, but the way they are and the way they act and the things that they say, even that they know how to say, aligns perfectly with what I'm talking about. That never left you. That never left you. And so when you sit and you might ask yourself, man, how do I get back to being happy like when I was a kid and that freedom and all that stuff? Don't put this whole idea that your life has to look a certain way and that you have to get back to that level of freedom to where you don't have responsibilities, because I'm going to pair that in with the whole idea of getting to a point and finally being okay. It's the same thing when you are trying to manifest something and you're trying to reach your goals. If I handed you these goals, right in front of you, and gave you everything you ever asked for, and you had been suffering and you think that that's going to satisfy you, it's not. And it's the same thing with this. I could literally set up all the same conditions. This might sound weird, but I can legit put you back in your childhood home. Remove that you have to work a job. Remove that you have to worry about any type of finances, and give you the responsibility of literally just doing chores. I'll even take having to go to school out of it, and I promise you that's not going to do it. So don't think it's a conditioned thing in terms of something that your reality has to look that way. This is grouped in the same way with your manifestations. You are the source of happiness and that freedom feeling. So just ask yourself, what was it you did as a kid? What was it you did as a kid? Because I promise you didn't sit there and think about, man, how am I going to make money? How am I going to make rent? Obviously, you have to pay rent, but you weren't thinking about your finances. You weren't stressing about how you're going to, be successful in life. You weren't doing any of that. You were literally living your day. You didn't even reflect on it oh, that was such a good day. You just lived it. And now is when you look back on it. Now is when you look back and you're like, wow, I was living, because you were. But what did you do? For example, I remember, for me, from a personal standpoint, I remember when I was a kid, I did everything in my power to just draw. Anywhere I was, if I was with my mom, and she, God bless her, she always brought this with her, but she had a paper and pen for me, and if she didn't, she would find something. And I remember specific memories. I would go to my brother's soccer games, indoor soccer, and they were set up and the crowd was there, and I remember I would just ask my mom for that, and I would be laying down in the corner of the gym, and I would just be drawing on this small piece of paper, just whatever. On top of that, do you think I ever looked at it and was like, oh man, this isn't good enough, people aren't going to like this? No, I didn't care at all. I literally did not care at all. That thought didn't even enter me. It wasn't even something that entered and I was like, oh, I don't care. No, I didn't even enter my consciousness. My 6 or 5 year old, I don't even know how old I was. Yes, I tried to stop saying 6, 7 right there, but I ended up saying it anyway. Dang it. But I was a young kid. I didn't have a care in the world, but that's what I'm saying, that type of stuff. The thing you did just because you enjoyed it. And I know what you're going to do when you think about this right now. Like, you think about that and like, that doesn't get me anything. That doesn't get me anywhere. That doesn't make money. I can't make a business out of this. How is this going to make a living for it? And I think that is exactly the pinpoint. Right there is exactly what is keeping you from living that childhood freedom. I think that mindset is what's stopping you. Because everything you look to do is to gain something, to gain some type of money from it, or a career, or an opportunity. Like, why don't you just do it? And something wonderful I have learned, and I genuinely value this, is if you're wanting to do something that you love, that also makes you money, and you want it to be your living, here's what I'm going to push a little bit on. Because I've mentioned this in a previous video, where you might reject systems. You might reject having a system because you want to be free, and you don't want to be someone that just, like, specifically in this context, ruins something that you enjoy for the sake of it making money. And I can understand that. And that's what might make you hesitate as doing that. But you have to understand something. If you genuinely want something to make money, and you want to make it a business, or you just want it to, provide with you, you have to treat it as such. Because if you work a job, I want to ask you this: how are you able to show up 5 days a week, maybe 6, 7, I did it again, 6 or 7 days a week to a job that you don't really necessarily like? You just do it for the paycheck. But when it comes to the things that you would tell me to my face and vow on it that you love drawing, you love art, you love making music, you love doing this, you can't put the equivalent amount of time into it. I'm not talking the whole 8 hours a day, but like, you can't even put an hour a day into it for 5 days a week when you can show up to your job because you have to. That's what I need you to start asking yourself. I'm not trying to call you out. I'm trying to gently push, because I want you to be truthfully happy. And the mindset that you've been living with, I don't think that type of mindset is going to lead you to happiness. So if you want to do something that you love, and you want that to be your moneymaker, and you want to get to that point, you have to frame it like, okay, I need to treat this like so. I need to do this every day. I need to actually do it for the money making. Because if you try to do that middle line, you're never going to commit fully to either one. And I've experienced that. And I want to warn you, if you run that middle line of like, I'll do it a little bit and see if it makes money, you're going to delay a result if you're trying to make money completely. You're going to delay it if it's ever going to happen. But you're also going to take away time of actually experiencing the craft. And I promise you, once it starts actually providing and making money, you're going to relax a little bit, because you're going to realize that to get to that point was never a skill issue. It was never this just isn't for me. You just had to frame it a different way. You had to frame it as something that's actually going to do for you. And again, when it comes, and I don't want to stray too far from the theme of this video, but this does have to do with it. When it comes to that childhood happiness, listen, we're adults. We're adults, and when you grow up, yes, in this society, I mention it again, in society, you got to make a living. Money and making a living and finances are just a way of our life. The thing is, though, you don't have to suffer through them. And on top of that, just because you have responsibilities does not mean you cannot experience that childhood happiness. You just have to frame things the right way as to, why am I doing this? And on top of what I just mentioned about that thing providing for you, if you don't want that to be your moneymaker, like genuinely ask yourself, you don't, then don't. Treat it as something that, no, I am just going to do this because I enjoy it. I am just going to do this because it's something that I enjoy doing. Beefing for no reason, bro. I'm gonna let y'all watch this. Watch this. She about to pounce. Watch this. Then he just runs away. So I don't usually do this or ask of this, but I'm going to give you a little bit of homework. I want you to just journal. This is the best way to do it, but if you want to just sit and think about it, that's fine too. And I want you to genuinely give yourself time, like put down distractions. And I want you to ask yourself, what did I do as a kid all the time? And if it's not something you did all the time for some reason, what was the one thing you always were so excited to do? And don't, listen, do not use the frame of what I just talked about. I kind of went on a tangent right there. Don't use the frame of like, okay, let me think of something that I love doing, but that also makes money. No. Scrap all that. It can be something that is literally completely trivial and arbitrary, just like I also loved to just be outside. Standing outside doesn't make money. Like, playing with sticks doesn't make money. I love to look for rocks. I loved playing with ants. I love when there was a little ant hill. I literally just let them crawl on my finger. I loved bugs. I loved them. But, like, that doesn't make money. So don't, like, get the money out of this. I probably shouldn't have brought that up, but I did just to kind of get that frame down of what can go on in today's world. Just think about the thing that you love to do. And from that point, I want you to actually make time for that thing. I don't care what it is. And I don't care how often. But make it regularly. If you are a very busy person, like myself, and like most of us in today's world, with all types of stuff, all types of responsibilities, then don't put too much pressure at first. What I want you to do, allot 1 hour a week. I know that sounds like nothing, but you got to start small, especially if it's something you haven't been doing. 1 hour a week. And if you do that and you had a blast and you realize you could have more time, start doing more, 2 to 3 times a week. And you realize you have more, start doing it all the time. Because here's the thing. We've been conditioned for so long that it's harder for us to just do something without thinking about, oh, what could I be doing with this time? So guess what? Make time for it. When you make time for it, then it's going to start being something that you just do. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to think about, oh, when can I do this? You just do it. And you can start to unlock that childhood freedom that has been there the entire time. You just, again, you got to be patient with yourself at first. And you have to realize that you have been conditioned. That's not a bad thing. It's what happens. It's what happens in this society. You have been conditioned. And just as easily that you've been conditioned, you can be unconditioned. You just have to be patient. Patience is the ultimate virtue in this. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great day.